You're listening to Pro Booth Talk, education and insights for photo booth company owners.
Welcome back to Pro Booth Talk, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us.
So we want to discuss a little bit today about iPads versus DSLR photo booths. And I guess I should preface by saying that when we say DSLR, it's kind of become a universal term for any professional camera in the photo booth. We don't want to get into like some are mirrorless now and some we're just saying DSLR as meaning a professional grade camera and not a digital iPad camera. So it's been an interesting transition really into the iPads. I remember when I first got started, I had some friends, we were at a bar and someone mentioned like, why don't you build a photo booth that uses an iPad? And at the time I was just like, that could never happen. iPads just don't have the power and the software like needs and demands, and the cameras are just so low quality. And it was still several years, 3 or 4 years before the first one kind of got introduced. And even still then I feel like it may have been too early, but we needed that early person to kind of jump in to start building the building blocks. And I think a lot of people were kind of against it in the beginning. I know I was personally. There were some pioneers, I think, that saw the potential, but I was against it. And my first iPad booth, I'll tell a brief story. It was during PBX. I was looking at the iPad booths. I had no love for them. They couldn't print yet. Everyone was kind of selling it as it doesn't need to print. People don't even care about prints anymore, because when you're selling things with a shortcoming, that's what you do. You lie, because obviously once they started printing, that wasn't something everyone said anymore. Everyone was like, yeah, they of course they print. Everyone wants prints. I had no interest, but one of the photo booth companies there, Aurora with Mike and Mike, were giving away a free photo booth, one of their floor models. So they had a raffle. I, like many other people, entered that raffle, and there's so many names because you had to be present to win. I wish I had a recording of those names, because I probably know a lot of those people now that I have their photo booth were called and weren't there. And finally, and it just happened to be my birthday, I won this photo booth that I had really no interest in, because I didn't want to participate in the iPad world, but it's free, so I'll take it. Like instantly it changed everything about my company, because they're just so revolutionary.
What year was this, Jason? What year was this, though?
The very first year that Moby Booth was there selling the Auroras. So 2010 maybe, if I had to guess. I'm not sure. And it was interesting because the conversation was always like, everyone was, oh, you got an iPad booth. That's cool, because I've been thinking about getting one so that I have a cheaper option. And that was my mindset for a second too. I was like, okay, I'll just use this as a cheaper option. That's fine. I've got it. I've got to use it. And almost instantly I realized that it wasn't a cheaper option. It was the same price. And very quickly it almost became a more expensive option. And I was telling everyone, like, I'm making way more money off my iPad photo booth than I am the DSLRs, because they are such an easy tool to sell to marketing events. Like you have like the photo booth upload and things like that, but having the microsites and the analytics and all of that just like built in to the system was just so convenient. And iPad's ability to render low lighting situations, and their ability to do like facial recognition, to do demographics of the age groups that are coming through your photo booth and the sexes that are coming through your photo booth, was just so powerful at the time that no other booths could do it. So it was very quick that we started buying more photo booths, more iPad-based photo booths. We still obviously love the DSLR kiosks for things like weddings and things where the photo quality was more important, because the iPad booth obviously had a much lower image quality. But we were sold instantly. As I'm eternally grateful that they had that giveaway, because I don't know how many years it would have taken me to get into iPad photo booths had I not won that first one. So was this
during
Booth.
When Simple Booth was the iPad software? Because I know SnapPick and Curator only came out just a few years ago. Was this during the Simple Booth days? That was the only iPad software There was also another one that I know that existed around that time. Was that the software you were using?
There were a couple softwares. I mean, the first photo booth software that I can think of for the iPad was it wasn't even Simple Booth. It was I can't remember the name of it, but I don't know if Snap was around, but Curator definitely was. I don't know how long they've been doing it, but I used another photo booth software. I can't remember what it was now for only a few months, and then I switched over to Curator, and I was using Curator pretty exclusively until I discovered SnapPick, and it nothing against Curator. I love James and everything they do over there, but Curator, especially for analytics at the time, was a better fit for what I was looking for, and I switched over to Snap and pretty much have been exclusive to them ever since, barring random things that I need that they won't can't execute. I'll still go over and use Curator or whatever I need to use. What about
Yeah,
you?
I was
I saw
not,
you nodding
I
about
wasn't,
also agreeing that you weren't on board for iPad booths. What made you jump in?
I Oh my gosh, I definitely was against iPads. I know 6, 7 years ago, this is probably around that same time frame when they first came to market, and I had several conversations with people. I know there was a lot of like seasoned boothers that saw the value of it, but I couldn't look past because I'm all the way I pitch my company is like studio quality lighting, DSLR cameras. So for me, it was a step backwards, and I couldn't see potential of it, and I always argued against it. And it was I only embraced iPad boost maybe 2 years ago, Jason. So I am like one of the late comers. Like I was so against it because the only thing I could see was the photo quality. That's the only thing I could see. And once I was able to look past that, exactly what you're talking about in terms of like microsite branding, data analytics, like all that stuff is so valuable on the marketing side. That's what I push with for it now, and I see the value of it now and I totally see why it's worth more than a DSLR booth on the branding side. But when I first saw iPad booths, I mean, I was on iPad booths early, like Simple Booth. There was a couple other software that I had tried. I can't remember their name at this time either, but I didn't see it as the potential that it actually came to fruition. I saw it more like the simple option. I mean, Simple
Mm-hmm.
Booth really did a great job of selling that aspect. Like Simple Booth had like just the C stand. You just open it up. It's just a small ring light, very small, very portable. Load it up, start, and you drop it. And no printing at that time at all. So to me, it was a very simple option. It was the budget option that I would sell to my clients, and even then my clients in my area, my market, they didn't embrace it because the clients I had were all wedding clients. They all wanted prints. I know there was a lot of buzz that people were claiming nobody wanted prints, but I never saw that on my side. I never saw that to the clients that I work with. I know if you're dealing more with the marketing side, LA area. I know I'm from LA, but like if you're marketing to corporate back in the day, I could totally see it being only digital. So I don't think
Mm-hmm.
they're lying. I think it's just we have different clients, because I do white label events for companies that don't do prints at all. They just do digital. It took me a long time to embrace it. And, a lot of folks that were peers that I used to talk to for many years, like they would try to get me to understand the value. And I just kept like, no, 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 no. It's just very stubborn and not wanting to listen. Yeah. So now
I
they
think we
laugh
have an
at me because
episode
they're
about
like,
that.
yeah. And now they laugh at me because like, wow, that finally like crossed over and seeing the light. And it's true because you can make so much money doing it. It's not even about the equipment. It's just about like what your client needs and what you can provide for them. And, the iPad boost had that microsites built in, text sharing, analytics all built into one. You didn't have to have a whole separate sharing solution. Now we're all pretty much assimilated to that. Like we're all used to just the photo booth capture and the sharing just integrate into one. So it's so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But, my company, we did separate sharing solution for many years, and it was a source of a lot of our a lot of our like tech support. Like we really had to
Yeah.
invest a lot of time into tech support because of the network. So just streamlining that is just so much nicer. And I love that a lot of these iPad companies, before they were strictly iPads, but now, we're talking about these companies integrating DSLR cameras into the iPad. So there's not a big, for a lot of us, it's not even DSLR or iPad. Now it really is just one solution, and it took a lot of extras out of our workflow, just the capture device, the sharing device, the data, the analytics, all in one microsite, all built into one. It's been a great change, honestly.
Yeah, and we were doing the same thing with. We had a lot of iPads because we were using them for share stations. And I remember when I got my first share station, there was more of a line over there than there was at the photo booth, because just like the idea of sharing it directly to Facebook, like there wasn't microsites back then, and people actually had to like plug in their Facebook passwords and Instagram passwords and stuff and share directly. And pretty quickly we developed microsites so that people could share, just send it to their phones and then share from there, and that it made a lot more sense. But it was, you're right, like another thing we had to pack along, another thing we had to set up, and a huge opposition point for connectivity and troubleshooting, because you have that wireless connection. Anytime you have anything wireless, you're going to have, some kind of resistance and issues.
Right.
So, and it's been so long, like every now and again, if we're doing a marketing event that we expect to have heavy lines and we need a huge throughput, or if we're doing like an enclosed 360 or an overhead 360 or something where it's not as easy for people to type in their phone numbers, we'll have a separate sharing station. But it's pretty rare. Like we almost never have sharing stations anymore, even if a client wants one. Even though we could make more money on the sharing station, where it's like it takes people like 3 seconds to punch in their phone number. Like with a sharing station,
they don't even have to punch. They don't have phone number anymore. Like they can QR download. There's also pre-registry. Like I know with Breeze, you can pre-register everything. So as soon as I think SnapPick is like that too, like where you can
do like
enter your info and it.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, yeah, face recognition, it'll just automatically send it to you anyways. I love the changes. I think the only downfall that I've seen so far, like the only challenge that I wish that they would really streamline, is the printing aspect. I know back in the day, iPads didn't even have printing as an option. Although I swear Simple Booth always had printing, but it was wireless. It's super vague memory, but I think that's the only issue right now. Like there is some folks who do struggle, and I know I was one of them too, like struggling with like finding a solution with your hardware, your hardware to be able to connect wirelessly or even hardlined and just being very solid and reliable. This new solution we found, I love. I worked with a few boothers on getting it set up, but I think that's the only thing with iPads that I hear a lot right now, like where the printing disconnects mid-event or.
Mm-hmm. We had that issue a lot, just constantly. We connect it, and then halfway through the event, it would just spin and spin and spin and say it can't connect to the printer. Or in the beginning of the event, mostly like we just couldn't find our printer server, our print computer couldn't find the network that we were all connected to. Just always some kind of weird connection issue. So we tried to not print at all if we could avoid it. If someone wanted prints, we would push a DSLR Windows based, just because everything could connect directly to it. So tell me a little bit about your solution. You've told me before, but for everybody else, what solution are you using for prints? Just a very...
Oh man, Jason, I've configured all of them. Like everything that you've seen, I've done the wireless, I've done Wi-Fi, I've used the router. The recent one I haven't talked to you about because I just configured it like 2 days ago. I have it connected hardline. So there's a mini PC in there, and then the iPad is connected to a hub, and they are connected through Ethernet cable. And then I have some apps that just automatically push on the printer server and Connectify. So now my team, when they power on the PC, they power on the iPad, everything just automatically syncs. All they have to do in Snappic, because I use Snappic for our iPad DSLR. We do iPad only too, but for iPad DSLR, we use Snappic. And they only have to connect to the printer server. So they don't even have to open the printer server on the PC because it automatically just turns on itself now too. So it's very streamlined for my team now. And we ran an event this past weekend and it worked flawless. There was no issues with connection because it's an Ethernet cable between the two.
Right. Yeah, I saw somebody sharing a similar solution on the Snappic group, and I want to try and implement it, but we're working on something else right now that I'm going to mention in a bit. So historically, an argument for DSLR booths or Windows-based booths were, they looked more professional. You had a real camera on there instead of an iPad. You had like a strobe and a flash, and you can plug the printer and the camera and everything directly into the computer. So it was much more reliable in that respect. And also those softwares had the ability to call on other softwares like Photoshop to create unique outputs that iPad just couldn't compete with, because you could build filter and things like that, but you couldn't call on other softwares. But like you've already mentioned, recently we've seen a merge of the two worlds shift. And people were doing it for a couple of years, but it was always through like workarounds and things like that. But recently it's become built in that iPads can connect to cameras, hardlined, and there's really not a whole lot of reasons anymore to go one way or the other. Like, I feel like the perfect union is an iPad with a DSLR camera for almost like probably 70% of what we're doing. And there's a few things that we can't use those for, and I'll get into those too. But for most situations, it's just such a perfect fit.
It is, but it isn't. I think with all the capabilities that iPad has now, there's actually things you can do with an iPad or even iPad DSLR booth that you can't do with a Windows-based booth. I haven't moved our fleet that direction, and my biggest thing is I use TeamViewer to remote into all of our booths. So I have a team that runs events, but I'm always part of it remote. So I have the ability to like remote in and take control of the computer if need be. That is the one Achilles heel I feel with the iPads, that I struggle with being able to comfortably move my entire fleet over. Just because on an iPad, you do have, like, Snappic has like a remote in capability. You just can't take full control of the iPad like you can with the Windows, like if I need to reboot a PC. Yeah. Well, it depends on who you ask, Jason, because there's some people who have no issues connecting through the Snappic remote app at all. I don't have that experience I don't have that experience myself. But I just, I need the control, and that's the reason why I haven't moved my fleet over to iPad DSLR. Although iPad is right now a lot more powerful than a Windows based for the most part. iPad, you're gonna have a lot more freedom to be creative with your photo booth output and workflows. But just me not being able to like remote in like I can with the Windows PC, that's my hesitation. That's probably the only, that and the printing not always being solid. Although I think I've already figured that out. Yeah.
So there are still some advantages, like the remoting in. One of our biggest disadvantages for Windows-based computers is in our own workflow. When we're setting up a Windows-based computer, we actually have to unpack that box, pull that photo booth out, turn the Windows computer on, and team view in or remote into that to set it up on that device. I know there's some softwares where you could set it up on one device, put it on a flash drive, and move it over, but with what we're doing, that doesn't work. Whereas with an iPad, it's browser based, so we can set everything up in SnapPick on the browser, and then people could literally grab any of our iPad based booths and just hit refresh, and all those events are on the kiosk automatically. Whereas with a Windows based, really they've got to make sure they grab the right kiosk, or else their event won't be on there. I mean, there's solutions to get it there afterwards, but it certainly isn't
I think
ideal.
it depends though, because I use Breeze DSLR remote and it just pulls the files. My team still has to do a couple clicks, but we can load an event as long as it has internet. It'll pull, the change on the overlay, because it just DSLR remote pulls from the files themselves, like the file folder. So we don't, unless it's a full-on changeover, like portrait to landscape. But again, that's just a couple clicks.
Yeah, so I guess it's software reliant. Like I know Photo Booth Upload, I think you can like load through a browser and refresh. But I'm using Darkroom and I am not able to. I mean, there's ways to, with saving files to the screen and transferring that screen over, and you could do that remotely, but it's not very intuitive. It's not something that I would want to try and train all my staff on.
It's not streamlined.
Yeah. So what I've been doing personally, and I feel like it solves every issue that you've mentioned as well, and we've briefly discussed this also in the past, we don't actually have any iPad and DSLR exclusive booths. We're basically just moving away from Windows and moving towards Mac based, because a lot of the iPad softwares can be installed on a Macintosh. So our system is basically setting it up on a Mac, using an iPad as the touch screen, and then using a DSLR. And this allows us to connect everything directly to the Mac. So you have nothing wireless. The printer, the camera, everything connects to the Mac. The iPad connects to the Mac. It also is great because it has a complete built-in backup system. If the Mac completely dies, then it's one plug that we remove from the Mac to the iPad, and then all the software is already on the iPad. If you're using SnapPick, it's already there. So you just move over to the iPad. Even if the camera dies, it's not ideal, but the iPad cameras we're very familiar with. We're already using them in some of our booths. So you have, at least the show can go on. I mean, we have a backup camera as well, but you have that extra layer of backup as well. TeamViewer, Splashtop, whatever you're using for a remote client to get into your computer, no problem. You can put that on your Mac. So we can now, Splashtop in or remote in to all these different events and completely control the computer from wherever we're at. And it's just been such a easy system for us, and it's been incredibly more solid. We don't have to pull any kiosks out. We can set it up in the browser. They just set it up and hit refresh, and everything's ready to go. It's almost a perfect solution for us. The only things that we can't do still is utilize other softwares like Photoshop through droplets and things. But I'm hoping if more people use Snap on a Mac or Curator on a Mac, then these companies will see the value of implementing things like droplets and things like that, and we'll be able to. That's the dream for me, anyways, is to get away from Windows completely. I am a Mac person, and I would love to just use Mac photo booths. But
I mean, I love the idea of like being able to use a Mac where you could just remote in. You're using a photo booth as an iPad, but you still are able to remote in and take control. Like I know we talked about this in a past episode, but I didn't even know that you could do that with Mac. So that's really interesting. I really want to start.
As long as it has the M1 or M2 chip, you can use the Mac.
Yeah. All the iPads that we use for boothing, besides the sharing station ones, are M1 or M2. Have you seen any limitations on like how you can use that configuration that you have using the Mac? Like, is there anything that you can't do in a regular traditional photo booth kiosk using that Mac?
So
like
we've got that system set up in our photo bus, and for that we didn't use an iPad. We used a larger touch screen because we wanted that impact of a large screen inside the bus. And Mac unfortunately doesn't play very well with a lot of touch screens. It's not a, and I don't know why, but we had to find a very specific touchscreen that the Mac would communicate with well. And then it still wasn't, we had to do some workarounds to get it to function the way we wanted it to. Also, when you use an iPad, you have, if you're familiar with the Mac world, there's something called Sidecar where you can automatically just connect your iPad and use it as a second screen. But unfortunately, with programs like SnapPick, you need to either use a stylus or an Apple Pencil or something like that. It doesn't respond to finger touches the way that an iPad normally would. But we use a software called, I'll have to mention it later. It was on my desk here, but it's not anymore. So we have to use a different software that ultimately is making the screen be an application on the iPad. So we open that application up, and it's communicating with the computer hardwired together, and it's just telling the iPad to use it as a monitor. So there was that extra step that we had to take. When we first started doing it with our bus, SnapPick didn't have a keyboard built in, so it was using the iPad keyboard. So without the iPad, there's no keyboard to pull up. So we could use the text feature, but we couldn't enter emails because there's no way to enter text, but that since has been fixed. So really, and then I guess also the look here natively was pointing to the top of the iPad. So our iPads are now landscape instead of portrait, and as well as in our bus, the screen is set up as a landscape and not portrait. So the look here was pointing to the left and not up to where the camera actually is. But I had been commuting with SnapPick about that, and they told me they would install a fix for that in their latest update, which makes sense because more people are using DSLR and iPads together, and I think instinctively people are setting their iPads up portrait, so they needed to make that fix anyways. And now the new iPad Pro actually has their camera placement in the landscape position. It's not on the top anymore. So a lot of people won't even be able to use a lot of their kiosks if they change the iPads that they're using. And I'm pretty sure the update they just pushed a couple of days ago does have that change so that you can change where the arrow is pointing for the look here feature, and you can put that to a landscape orientation. So with those limitations that have already been addressed, I can't really think of anything that we've had to do to fix that or to make it more user friendly. It's every one of my hosts that have taken out the new kiosk, we're using a men booth for it, came back and they're like, "Can you make every one of your photo booths like this?" They love every bit of using the Mac, and that they
That's
ultimately
awesome.
all just enjoy using SnapPick more than other softwares because it's really just hit start and go, and there's no other things that they have to tick or turn on or whatnot. So it's been a good transition for us. Obviously, it's very expensive to replace all your photo booths and computers and stuff, so it's going to be a transition that we do over a couple of years. But we're going to start slowly migrating all of our systems to being Mac-based, and we'll probably keep 3 or 4 Windows-based just so that we can run droplets because we do a lot of Glamour photo booths and we use droplets for that. Unless SnapPick can step up and start communicating with Photoshop on the Mac and running droplets and things like that, then we'll probably make a full transition over and move completely away from Windows-based systems.
SnapPick Glam isn't bad though. SnapPick Glam isn't bad. The one that's built natively in it.
But I want people to be able to, and that's one of the selling points we use when we're, because some people sell Glam for very cheap. Like we saw an ad at our last wedding show where people are saying add Glam for $75. And it makes sense for them because they don't understand why it's an extra charge, because they're just turning a filter on. So there's really nothing else they're doing. And we use that as a selling point, that all those filters do is soften the entire photo. But if you look at our outputs, you can like that bride is spending so much time on those eyelashes, make sure that you can see them. We want you to see every eyelash. We only want our effects softening the skin. We want to see that amazing hair. We want to see the textures in that dress, and those are some of the selling points that we use when we're selling our Glamour. And you can't do that if you're using a Glamour or a Glamour filter on SnapPick.
Like a native one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask, with DSLR and iPad kind of meshing, like when do you have a case? Do you still have cases where you're sending out just an iPad? Like when would you use just an iPad versus an iPad DSLR? I mean, is that something that you guys are still doing?
Aesthetically, I think a lot of the marketing events still are looking for very clean, simple setups. Where maybe you can make the argument that some of the DSLRs aren't as clean and simple as that. Like a Pearl or an Aurora are very minimalist and very small, whereas I don't know, Lumia is a bit bigger and bulkier. But like the Min booth also is very, very clean and small, even though it has a DSLR. So it's hard to make that argument. What are you seeing? Can you think of a situation where a exclusive iPad booth makes better sense?
Yeah, I mean we use DSLR Windows based DSLR iPad, and then we use strictly iPads. I really like iPads for just like marketing events. That's usually when we use it, where the focus isn't the photo quality, but it's more like they want the data, they want the analytics, they want a very clean setup, small footprint. They don't necessarily need a backdrop. That's one of the things that's a
And
bonus
then you're moving away from a
with
strobe
the
and an umbrella.
yeah, so you're not taking up extra space. You know, a lot of these events, sometimes you have like a big crowd of people all in a very small amount of space. The AI background removal has been just so amazing. Like there's I even venture to say it's better than green screen. You know, I mean, of course there's situations where it's not, because the AI background removal recognizes, you know, people. And a scenario where I wasn't happy with the results was like I did a photo booth for my daughter's graduation, and the kids had a diploma in their hand, and for whatever reason the AI was removing the diploma. So, you know, like for the most part the AI background is really awesome. And you know, when you have a very small footprint that you're working with, or they don't have the space for 8x8 backdrop, I love just a strict iPad, you know, because you can set it up really close. If you have small lights that you set up beside it, you can get pretty good lighting. If you have good
Mm-hmm.
lighting, you can get pretty good photos, you know. I think it's more of an issue with iPads if you are set back super far. Um,
Yeah.
and you're really restricted with lighting. But I feel that's a huge thing that you should be discussing with your clients. There's clients who book the iPad only photo booth. They just want digital shares and whatnot. I'm seeing like the LED lights or the those boxwood backdrops with their branding. And then when you show up, you have to be set 8 feet back. I see that a lot with a lot of the branding events, where I feel
Yeah.
like a DSLR would have been so much better solution. You know, you charging more for a DSLR iPad versus just a drop off iPad or a selfie booth iPad.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess you just mentioned drop offs. That is certainly a position where iPad exclusive booths make way more sense. Like I wouldn't
Yeah.
drop off an iPad plus DSLR booth or use it for a lease or anything. And maybe there's people out there that do, but I can imagine trying to use a DSLR iPad for a long-term lease or even a short-term lease, like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I don't have the confidence in that yet. I've done DSLR Windows based as a drop off, and I didn't have any issues with it. And I know there's some companies who have, you know, long-term installs with like DSLR remote, with DSLR, and it hasn't been an issue. I don't know if I'm that confident with the iPads yet
Mm-hmm.
for that type of
Me
solution.
neither, and
Yeah.
I guess I should be, because when we were doing the testing with this setup that I just mentioned, we had it in our front office, and internally the office people were using it, and we told any hosts that were picking it up, take some photos on this and test it out. We had AI set up on it to encourage them to use it more, and we were really trying to put the test on it of different scenarios, and over multiple days, it ran without issue, and we besides doing that testing internally that we typically do, the first maiden voyage for that, like one of our white labelers specifically needed that setup, and we told him like, this is something that we've been working on, but we haven't taken it live to an event yet, especially a 4-day event that's going to be like back-to-back constant stuff. So, I was transparent with them, but that was the maiden voyage. The first time it ever went out was for a conference for a white labeler that was, we were doing like 90 photos an hour. It was just constant line and huge pressure, and absolutely zero issues with it. So
that's awesome.
We're pretty proud of that setup. But again, like if we're doing a drop off, I would still be uneasy about a DSLR connection. I don't know why. Maybe because historically I can't let go of those issues, but
yeah, but there's a lot of components that have to work together for it to actually work. So I get that too. Like it would be hard for me to do a DSLR anything as a drop off for, more than 4 hours. I've done 4 hours, but on Windows, I can remote in, I can see what's going on. I can see when the system's going down, I haven't had that issue, but I know sometimes even on attended booths, like we have, the hot shoe go out or the USB cable go out, just not having someone on site to be able to change those components is very scary to me. But when you talk about just strictly iPad, you eliminate a lot of that, and not everything. Of course, we've had a situation where, people were stepping on for whatever reason, they like stepped on the power brick and disconnected it. And after 2 hours, the selfie booth went down out of power, of course. So there's always something that will,
Yeah, I feel like because of all of that, iPads have a much smaller learning curve too. So it's a lot easier for new photo booth owners to come in first with an iPad booth. And I think that's probably a trend that we've seen. Most young boothers are probably iPad-based booths.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the technology on them have grown so much in the last few years. And, if you add a little bit of lighting, you really can get pretty decent photos if you know what you're doing, if you know how to adjust lighting settings. If you can set the photo booth close enough, you can get I've seen some iPad booth photos that look better than DSLR photos. It really comes to your skill level and what type of output you actually get from it.
Yeah, and actually understanding what you're doing instead of just using opening Snappic or whatever software you're using and hitting start. Actually adjusting the lighting and adjusting the shutter speeds and ISO. It's like they still have those settings, but people tend to only use them in the DSLR world and not so much in the iPad world for some reason. Another place.
It's a drastic difference if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you can, like you said, like get very near DSLR quality, especially with these new iPads that like their cameras are just so impressive.
Yeah, especially in the daylight too. When you don't have the extra burden of having to like figure out lighting for your iPad. Sometimes iPad photos during the daytime look better than DSLR because there's a lot of people who have no idea what they're doing with camera settings at all, and an iPad is pretty much auto when it's in daylight, and those photos look amazing. Some of the photos I take with my iPhone look better than they do, like if you're going on a vacation and you have a DSLR, you can't dial in the settings real fast, so you have auto on your DSLR. Your DSLR is probably not as smart on auto as your iPad is.
Absolutely. Like Apple has dropped so much time and resources into that specifically. That's one of the biggest things that surprised us because, like I mentioned earlier, every time we set up a booth with Darkroom, we pull out that Windows-based kiosk from the box and we splash top or remote into it and set it up when we do test photos. But we don't set the flash and everything up. So our test photos are just always just black, just dark, and that's fine. But when we were doing test photos with this new system, we realized right away that the iPad and the Mac did such a good job of like evaluating everything. Our test photo looked amazing without a strobe or anything. And we were like, what in the world's going on here? Like, so we were doing testings. Like, we got to the point where we closed all the curtains in our office, closed all the doors, turned the lights off, and took like pitch black photos, and they looked horrible, but you could still see us. And it was just incredible.
Yeah.
The amount of resources that they've used to make those photos just very, very smart, I guess. It's very good at controlling the light and delivering photos that are at least good enough. So on that kiosk, if our strobe died, we have a backup bulbs and flashes and stuff. But if we were in a situation where we had no flash, I think we could finish the event without a flash with that kiosk. And
Still get by.
On a Windows base, we wouldn't be able to. That's pretty incredible. But, and roamers also, we are still pretty much not exclusive to iPad only. We have some DSLR roaming set up, but and of course we discuss this in more depth on
Wait, you have DSLR roamers or do you have roaming photographers? I feel like that is very distinct between the two.
We don't do any photography specific at all. So it's DSLR roamer, but we are only doing that if a client specifically asks, and then we're still very clear that we're not photographers. We're still a photo booth company. We'll use a DSLR camera if you prefer. And then it's very much just like a spot my photo situation, but using SnapPic. When we're selling roamers, we're selling like an iPad based roaming situation. And we do have one of those that houses a DSLR in case that's important to the client. But that we are still pretty much exclusive to iPad roaming setups within our own company, anyways.
Yeah. When we use roamers, we only use iPad roamers. We haven't done DSLR, but we do DSLR roaming photography where we roam around with like the flash. I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about. But I sell that more as like a photography rover photographer versus like a roamer, which is more like for fun photos. And, it's not the quality of the photo at all. It's more of like the experience as being in the action. Yeah.
Yeah. With our exclusive like DSLR in hand type roaming, we like if someone specifically asks for it, we can do it. But right now we don't market it. The only time we do it is for white labels that book it and use us. So we've got the equipment only for people that aren't ourselves because we don't offer photography within our own companies. And I feel that's too close to photography and too far away from photo booths. And
I don't know. The line is getting very blurred, Jason. The lines are getting very blurred. I don't feel
agree,
like the photo lounges are growing. Yeah, it's very blurred lines right now.
They are, and I see companies going in that direction, but ultimately we need to be able to set up everything in booth and have our host be able to turn it on and start and only know enough photography to do some very basic troubleshooting and not changing as they enter different rooms or from inside to outside. And as they're moving around the space, needing to be able to control different lightings and ISOs fluidly throughout an event. Like that's not who we're hiring. We're also photographers, I feel, are almost like ninjas that are more, behind the scenes, just photographing and moving around. And our staff, we specifically hire to be full engaging, high energy people. So it kind of goes against everything that we've kind of built and modeled our company around. So it's for some people, not so much for our company though. And that's, I think, important when people are making decisions. Don't just go with the latest trends. Like, make sure it fits your business model and what your company is trying to be. You don't have to do something just because every other company's doing it. And we've made a conscious decision to not do roaming photography, despite its popularity.
It's actually to your benefit to not be doing what everybody else is doing. Like I've always been, my mindset has always been like, if everybody is moving left, you should move right. If everybody's moving right, you might be better moving left. While everybody right now is pushing for glam, which I know, is really popular right now, we're pushing a different direction. So my company is leaning more into the photography side, but I've always been more photography driven anyway, so it fits
Mhm.
my brand. I know we've talked about this before. And then my team is trained on like dolly and lighting and adjusting it. The roaming side, we don't really push that too much because that actually takes real like live quick action, being able to like adjust lighting, exactly what you said when you move into different rooms. But like a photo lounge, my team can run, no problem. So we've been leading more
Yeah.
into the photography side.
And I'm okay with the photo lounge because, like a photo booth, that you set those settings up, and whoever's setting it up really only should have to know how to adjust the flash, because the other
Right.
settings should be pretty standard. And if they
Yeah, you don't change
deviate,
them.
like we've got tech support out in the office that can get in there and offer suggestions or changes, so we can still focus that hiring on the full engaging interactive person. And for a photo
Yeah.
lounge, you still want that person that's not afraid to get in there and suggest, maybe pop that hip a little bit and get
Yeah,
your arm on
exactly.
your waist, so that
Exactly.
stuff still makes sense. So
Yeah, exactly.
we are developing that product, like a photo lounge, right now. We partnered with so ours involves furniture and stuff, so we partnered with a local furniture company rental, and we went over to their warehouse and pulled a bunch of furniture, and they gave their 2 cents, and they'd pull out some sofas and lights to put together, and they're like, no, let's grab this over here, and we put together like 2 distinct packages that include different settings, and took a bunch of photos, and were there all day, and had some models come in, and we're about to put that out there, but we haven't included
Yeah.
it in any of our decks yet. We're going to kind of showcase it at an upcoming bridal show along with a couple other things, but it's something
It's
we're
gonna
working
stand
on.
out. Yeah, it's definitely gonna
Always
stand
working
out.
on stuff, but I think that's about it. DSLRs, Windows-based computers. Maybe that's what it should have been, more of a Windows-based versus iPad based, because
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
everything is DSLR or not these days. But anyways, I'm sure we left some stuff out. Let us know why you're using iPads versus Windows or DSLR based. An argument to or away from one or others of those items. Yeah, so let us know what you thought. If you thought we were on the mark or off the mark or whatever.
Yeah, come join us.
Pro Booth Talk community Facebook group. And
We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube.
yeah, I'll see
We're
you
on
next time.
Instagram.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody.
To keep the conversation going, join our Facebook group, Pro Booth Talk Community. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider showing your support by subscribing, liking, reviewing, or sharing this topic with someone in the industry.